My name is Layla Tiago, and I am 28 years old. The champagne glass trembled faintly in my hand as I stood before the mirror in the women's bathroom of the upscale restaurant. My only nice dress, a navy blue thing I had bought on clearance years ago, clung a little too loosely at the waist now. The fabric seemed to whisper reminders of skipped dinners, of coffee substituting for meals, of long nights where exhaustion replaced appetite. I used to imagine this dress marking the start of happy endings. Instead, it had become a record of sacrifices carved into my body. The fluorescent lights overhead were merciless. They highlighted the dark crescents beneath my eyes, the hollow in my cheeks, the calluses that had hardened across my hands from countless double shifts, hands that used to be soft, even pretty once. Now they told a different story, a story of survival, of relentless work, of someone who had poured herself out so another person could rise. That person was Wyatt Jacob. Tonight was supposed to be our night, our triumph. 4 years of scraping by, 4 years of endurance, 4 years of me believing that love was enough to justify everything. Tonight, Wyatt would step into his future as Dr. Jacob, and I would finally step out of the shadows with him. That's what I had told myself, over and over, whenever doubt crept in, during those long nights behind a cash register or hunched over a tray of dishes. A voice drifted in from the dining hall beyond the bathroom door. Laughter, clinking glasses, the kind of elegant soundscape that belonged to people born into comfort. Wyatt's people, his colleagues, his family. They were the new world I had spent years helping him reach, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, dream by dream. My phone buzzed against the cold marble counter. A text lit up the screen. "Where are you? They're about to start the toasts." Wyatt. I inhaled deeply, trying to steady myself, smoothed down the dress, with palms that trembled more than I cared to admit. This was supposed to be the culmination, the reward, the night when everything we had suffered for would be worth it. But even as I told myself that, a shadow of unease curled inside me. Something I couldn't name. A kind of hollowness in my chest, as though I were bracing for a blow without realizing it. I glanced at my purse lying on the counter. Inside, back at home in my apartment, was a folder. Manila, slightly frayed at the edges. Every receipt, every bank statement, every scrap of proof that I had funneled my life savings, $53,000, into Wyatt's education. That folder was more than paper. It was the ledger of my devotion. The sum total of my sacrifices, measured not only in dollars, but in bone-deep exhaustion, in hours stolen from my youth. It wasn't just money. It was missed birthdays with friends because I was working. It was the shame of telling my landlord I'd need another week. It was ramen dinners and thin winter coats. It was believing that all of it would be worth it when Wyatt and I finally stood on the other side, together. The bathroom door swung open suddenly, letting in a burst of chatter and perfume from the dining hall. 2 women passed behind me, laughing, their jewelry catching the light. Their world felt like another planet, one I had only visited as an imposter. The door closed again, leaving me staring at my own reflection. For a fleeting moment, I almost didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. Her eyes were too sharp, too tired. She didn't look like the girl who had once believed in fairy tales. She looked like someone balancing on the edge of something dangerous, humiliation or triumph, she couldn't yet tell. I whispered to my reflection, so soft it fogged the glass. "Tonight he'll see you. He has to." I picked up my glass of champagne, forcing my fingers to stop shaking, and walked toward the door. The hallway leading back to the banquet room was hushed, carpet muffling my footsteps. As I neared the double doors, I paused just before pushing them open. Through the crack, I could see chandeliers dripping golden light onto tables dressed in crisp white linens. Servers in starched uniforms glided silently with trays of hors d'oeuvres that looked like art sculptures. I tightened my grip on the glass. This wasn't my world. It was his. But hadn't I earned a place here? Hadn't my sacrifices bought me a seat at the table, right beside him? I remembered nights when Wyatt had stumbled into my apartment, his shoulders heavy with despair. "I can't do this," he had whispered more than once. And every time, I had lifted him back up, sometimes with words, sometimes with money I couldn't spare, sometimes just by holding him until the panic drained away. That was my contribution. That was what love looked like for me, building him a future with the pieces of my own. But love, I was beginning to realize, often had a cruel sense of timing. The doors opened, voices swelled, and the wave of Wyatt's world rushed toward me, I stepped inside. Bam. I moved slowly through the glittering crowd, the scent of expensive wine and perfume mingling thick in the air. The dining room buzzed with sophistication, the kind of sophistication that came from generations of security, not from clawing your way upward shift by shift. Wyatt's parents had spared no expense. Every detail was a declaration. Their son was destined for greatness. And then, across the room, I saw him. Wyatt Jacob, in his black tailored suit, the one I had helped him pick out, the one I had secretly paid for while telling him it barely dented my savings. His dark hair gleamed under the chandeliers. His smile flashed effortlessly as he shook hands with professors, colleagues, potential allies for the rest of his career. He looked like he belonged. And for one foolish, hopeful moment, I thought maybe I did too. Ela! His voice carried across the room when he spotted me. Warm, commanding, pulling eyes toward me as if to say, "This is the woman beside me." My heart surged. I wove through the tables, accepting congratulations from strangers who seemed to know exactly how much I had supported him. "You must be so proud," one elderly woman in pearls said, squeezing my arm. "Wyatt told us how supportive you've been." Supportive, such a small word. Such a fragile container for years of sacrifice. Wyatt's arm wrapped around my waist as I reached him, his hand firm, his smile dazzling. For an instant, for one fragile breath, it felt right. This was what I had worked for. This was where we were supposed to arrive together. His father tapped a silver knife against a wine glass. The room hushed instantly. "Everyone," Mr. Anthony Jacob said, beaming, "if I could have your attention." Wyatt squeezed my hand, anticipation fluttering in my chest like wild wings. This was it, the moment when he would finally say out loud what I had done, what we had built, what we meant to each other. The crowd leaned forward, glasses raised. The air shimmered with expectation. And though I didn't know it then, that was the last moment I would still believe in happy endings. The silence after Mr. Jacob's call for attention felt almost sacred. Crystal chandeliers glowed above us like constellations, their light spilling over rows of linen-draped tables, catching in the polished silverware. Every eye turned toward the head table where Wyatt and I stood. My hand was in his, my heart pounding so fiercely I was sure the entire room could hear it. "Tonight," Anthony Jacob declared with paternal pride, "we celebrate my son. 4 years of tireless study, of perseverance, of extraordinary accomplishment. Wyatt has not only graduated medical school with distinction, but has secured a residency at Metropolitan General Hospital." Applause rippled through the crowd like thunder. People rose from their seats, clinking glasses, their voices swelling into a chorus of congratulations. Wyatt stood taller, chin lifted, soaking in their admiration as if it were oxygen. His eyes swept the room, radiant, confident, and then they settled on me. For that one beat, I felt chosen. The applause quieted, and Anthony Jacob added, "But I think Wyatt has something he would like to say." Wyatt released my hand, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, yet it sent a tremor through me. He accepted the microphone with practiced ease. His dark eyes glittered under the lights, his expression calm, controlled. I expected nerves, a crack in his voice, perhaps even a trembling hand. Instead, he exuded assurance. That was the first moment I felt something shift. "Thank you all," Wyatt began, his voice carrying effortlessly, honed through years of presenting case studies and answering professors' questions. 4 years ago, when I began this journey, I knew it would be challenging. I knew I would need support, dedication, sacrifice. I nodded faintly, chest swelling, waiting. This was the moment. Surely now he would speak my name, make everyone understand. "I want to thank my parents," he continued, smiling at them with boyish charm, "for believing in me, for their financial support, for never letting me doubt my potential." A slight tilt of my head. Financial support? They had helped a little during his first year, yes, but after that, the burden had fallen almost entirely on me. Still, I told myself, he'll mention me next. He has to. "I also want to thank my professors, my mentors, and my fellow students," he added, sweeping his gaze toward a cluster of colleagues. "Each of you challenged me, sharpened me, pushed me to be better." The cold feeling began to creep back into my stomach. It wasn't panic yet, just confusion, like a draft sneaking through a closed window. I waited for the part where he would turn, gestured toward me, and acknowledged the sacrifices that had nearly hollowed me out. Wyatt's eyes flickered across the room, skimming past me before settling somewhere else. For a fraction of a second, when our gazes met, I thought I saw something flicker in his expression. Not love, not gratitude, something sharper, more distant. Pity. And still, I told myself, he's building up to it. He's saving the best for last. The guest leaned forward, captivated. Laughter and murmurs of agreement punctuated his words. He was charming them effortlessly, as he always did. Wyatt had a way of making people feel that they were part of something grand, even when they barely knew him. I had once fallen for that same magnetism. Around me, conversations buzzed in low tones. "Such poise," a man whispered. "He'll go far," another said. "Imagine the future he'll have." Each compliment was another stone laid at Wyatt's feet, building the pedestal he stood on now. And me? I felt myself shrinking beneath the weight of expectation, as though I were vanishing into the shadow of his brilliance. Wyatt's hand, which had rested briefly on my back as though to steady me, slipped away entirely. He stood alone at the front now, shoulders squared, smile dazzling. To everyone else in the room, he was the picture of success. To me, he was suddenly unfamiliar, a stranger wearing Wyatt's face. I could feel my pulse in my throat, thudding harder with every second he delayed. The anticipation became unbearable. Somewhere in me, a voice whispered, "He won't say it. He's not going to say it." But I pushed that voice down, smothered it with hope. Because what else did I have, if not hope? The room quieted again, waiting for his next words. I reached for my glass, hand trembling. Somewhere deep inside, a part of me already sensed the storm building on the horizon, though I still pretended not to. The lights glittered, the champagne fizzed in crystal flutes, and Wyatt Jacob, my Wyatt, stood at the center of it all. His voice lowered slightly, as though preparing to deliver something monumental. "Finally," he said, pausing for dramatic effect, "I want to acknowledge someone else." My breath caught. The world narrowed until it was only him and me, and the silence that stretched like a taut string between us. He looked at me then, directly, and I felt the ground tilt beneath my feet. What he was about to say would change everything. "Finally," Wyatt said, his voice ringing clear across the silent hall, "I want to acknowledge Isla." A collective sigh of relief rippled through my chest. My name at last. My shoulders relaxed slightly, and I braced myself for the words that would finally validate 4 years of sacrifice. "She's been a part of my journey," he continued. "She's worked very hard, and I appreciate everything she's done." The words hung in the air like smoke, vague, weightless, insubstantial. Worked very hard. Appreciate everything she's done. My smile faltered for the briefest second, then froze in place. It felt pasted on, stiff and unnatural. Around me, guests nodded approvingly, as though those words were sufficient to summarize the countless nights I had dragged myself home after a 14-hour shift, or the $53,000 drained from my savings. But Wyatt wasn't finished. "However," he said, and the word cut like a blade. The room shifted, subtle but undeniable. Guests straightened in their chairs, sensing drama. Servers slowed, trays hovering in midair. A charged hush swept through the chandeliers, over the crisp linens, into my pounding chest. "As I begin this new chapter of my life as a physician," Wyatt continued, "I realize I need to make difficult decisions about my future." I blinked, my breath caught. What was happening? His eyes found mine, and in them I saw no warmth, no gratitude, no apology, only calculation. "You've been there for me during my student years, Isla," he said evenly, "and I'll always be grateful for that. But the truth is, as a doctor, I need a partner who can match my professional and social standing, someone who understands the demands of this career, who can navigate the expectations that come with my position." The words struck like blows, each syllable hammered into me, pounding past my ribs. A waitress, a cashier. That's who I was to him. That's how he was branding me in front of everyone. Whispers erupted around the room. "Is he? Oh my God, he can't be serious." Wyatt's mother covered her mouth with her hand. Shock? Or was she hiding a smile? His father shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting away, but not surprised. They had known. They had all known. Wyatt let the silence stretch until the humiliation saturated the air. Then he delivered the final blow. "I need someone of my own class. Someone who can be an asset to my career, rather than a liability." It was a death sentence delivered in front of professors, mentors, colleagues, family. My skin burned hot, my face drained cold. I could feel eyes on me, some pitying, some fascinated, some almost gleeful. And then, with a practiced ease that made me sick, Wyatt raised his glass. So tonight, while we celebrate my achievement, I also want to announce that I'll be starting this new chapter as a single man, ready to build the kind of life and relationships that befit my status as a physician. He looked at me one final time, direct, unyielding. Thank you, Ela, for your service, but this is goodbye. The words detonated. Gasps echoed through the hall. Someone dropped a fork. It clattered loudly against china. A woman whispered, "Unbelievable." Another muttered, "Poor girl." Hands reached for me. Voices asked if I was all right, but everything was muffled, filtered through a haze of humiliation so sharp it felt like fire under my skin. 4 years. 4 years of empty savings accounts. 4 years of believing we were building something together. 4 years of love, of devotion, of sacrifice, discarded like an outdated textbook he no longer needed. My chest clenched, but then something shifted. Beneath the heartbreak, beneath the suffocating humiliation, a colder emotion began to rise. Harder, sharper, more dangerous than grief. I reached for my champagne glass with steady hands. The room held its breath, waiting for me to break down, to scream, to collapse, to storm out. Instead, I lifted my glass, and I smiled, a smile that sliced across my face like a blade. "To your success, Wyatt," I said, my voice ringing clear through the silence. "To getting exactly what you deserve." The collective gasp was audible. His glass paused midair. His confident smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. I took a deliberate sip, the bubbles fizzing bitter on my tongue, mingled with the copper taste of blood from where I had bitten my tongue to keep from screaming. Then, with poise I didn't know I possessed, I set down the glass, turned, and walked out of that glittering hall. Dozens of eyes followed me, their whispers chasing me across the marble floor. But I didn't stumble. I didn't cry. I held my head high as though dignity alone could shield me from the daggers of humiliation. Because in that moment, beneath the ashes of heartbreak, something else had taken root. The cold night air hit me like a slap as the heavy doors of the banquet hall closed behind me. The muffled sound of celebration carried faintly through the glass. Laughter, applause, clinking glasses, like a world sealed off from mine. My heels clicked against the pavement, sharp, hollow, echoing louder than the beat of my heart. I made it 3 blocks before the adrenaline that had carried me out dissolved, leaving only the raw weight of what had just happened. My chest caved, my knees buckled, and I stumbled into a narrow alley between 2 buildings. Pressing my back against the brick wall, I slid down until I was sitting on the cold ground, arms wrapped around myself. The sobs came fast, unstoppable, tearing through me in great heaving waves. 4 years. 4 years of double shifts. 4 years of ramen dinners, of aching feet, of believing in a man who had just discarded me like I was nothing. My sacrifices, my devotion, my love, exposed and ridiculed in front of strangers. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was cruelty, deliberate, calculated. He had chosen that moment, that stage, to sever me from his life. He had rehearsed it, planned it, maybe even laughed about it with his family. The image cut through me like glass. His mother's hand pressed to her lips, his father's uncomfortable but unsurprised expression. They had known. They had all known. And they had let me walk into that restaurant, let me smooth my clearance rack dress, let me hope, just to watch me burn. My stomach twisted. Shame and rage collided until I thought I might choke. I wiped at my face with shaking hands, but the tears kept coming. My mascara smeared, my breath hiccuped. For the first time, I let myself admit what I had never dared say out loud. Maybe my friends had been right all along. Maybe I had been nothing but a stepping stone, a placeholder, until he reached the life he really wanted. My phone buzzed in my clutch, once, twice, then a third time. I ignored it at first, unwilling to let Wyatt's voice invade this moment of collapse. But when I finally pulled the phone free, the screen didn't show his name. Instead, it was an unknown number. I saw what happened. I'm so sorry. Rebecca. Rebecca, Wyatt's cousin. The quiet one. She was always in the background at family gatherings, perched in corners, watching while others filled the room with noise. She had been there tonight. She had witnessed my destruction along with everyone else. Another buzz. Can we meet tomorrow? There are things you should know. My tears slowed. My breathing steadied. Something cold, sharp, and strangely comforting slid into place inside me. Rebecca knew something, and she wanted to tell me. I stared at her messages, heart pounding. Part of me wanted to reply immediately, to demand answers right now, but another part, the part that was hardening, crystallizing into something Wyatt had never imagined, told me to wait, to think, to gather myself before walking into whatever this new thread of truth would unravel. For now, I slipped the phone back into my clutch, pushed myself off the cold ground, and kept walking toward home. The city felt different tonight. The sidewalks harsher, the streetlights colder. I walked 12 blocks because I couldn't afford a cab. Each step carried me farther from the version of myself that had entered that restaurant. The naive woman who believed sacrifices guaranteed love was gone. In her place, something new was forming. When I reached my tiny apartment, I locked the door, kicked off my heels, and went straight to the desk drawer. My hands no longer shook. They were steady now, almost unnervingly so. I pulled out the manila folder, my archive of 4 years. Applications, transcripts, forms, all the tedious details Wyatt had been too busy, too brilliant, too important to handle. I spread them across the table, page by page, proof of everything I had done for him. And then I saw it. The discrepancy. A small error, one I had noticed months ago, but dismissed as inconsequential at the time. His undergraduate transcript listed his graduation date as May. But the medical school application, filled out by me, submitted in a rush after a double shift, listed December. 6 months earlier. I had meant to fix it. I had even left a sticky note reminding myself. But Wyatt had been impatient, insistent, pressuring me to submit quickly. And so it had gone through as is. A tiny mistake, barely noticeable, unless someone compared the documents closely, unless someone looked for it. Wyatt hadn't. Of course he hadn't. Details bored him. He left those to me, the liability. My pulse quickened. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a time bomb. If anyone discovered it, questions would follow. How had the medical school overlooked it? How had the licensing board approved it? Could it be misrepresentation? Fraud? And I was the only one who knew it existed. The irony was exquisite. Wyatt had discarded me tonight, declaring me unworthy of his world. But he had forgotten one thing. His world was built on the paperwork I had submitted for him. And in that paperwork was the thread that could unravel everything. My phone buzzed again. This time, the name on the screen froze me in place. Wyatt? I didn't answer. I let it ring. A minute later, it rang again. Then again, and again. 4 times in less than 10 minutes. Each time, the sound drilled into the silence of my apartment, vibrating with urgency. By the 4th call, curiosity tugged at me. My thumb hovered over the answer button. Finally, I pressed it to my ear. Layla! Wyatt's voice burst through, strained, desperate, stripped of its polished confidence. Thank God. Look, about tonight. I stared at the documents scattered across my table. For the first time all evening, my lips curved into something that wasn't a broken smile. Not warmth, not forgiveness. Something far colder. Because while Wyatt thought the story ended tonight, I was only just beginning to write the next chapter. Wyatt's voice crackled through the phone, frantic, nothing like the polished man who had stood so confidently before that crowd just hours ago. Layla, please, about tonight. It wasn't how it looked. I let the silence stretch. Let him hear my breathing, steady and unhurried, while my eyes roamed over the scattered documents on my table. His future lay there in messy stacks, applications, transcripts, licensing forms, all touched by my hand. Congratulations, Dr. Jacob, I said finally, my tone light, almost cheerful. How does it feel to be free of your liability? There was a pause on his end. I pictured him in his spotless apartment, hair mussed now, tie yanked loose, pacing the floor with that impatient energy he always carried. Don't say that, he pleaded. You know I didn't mean it like that. It was strategy. I had to present myself a certain way tonight, for my career, for the people watching. I laughed softly, though the sound surprised even me. It carried no humor, only bitterness, sharpened into a blade. Of course. Everything is for your career. Even me. That's not fair, he snapped, then softened again. Look, we can talk about this. You know I care about you. I just needed to make a clean break, publicly. Privately, we can... Privately, I interrupted, my eyes narrowing at the graduation date discrepancy highlighted under my desk lamp. No, Wyatt, publicly is what you chose. Publicly is what you planned. Privately is where you left the paperwork to me. He stammered, caught off guard. What does that mean? I let my fingers glide across the documents, tapping the line where December stood out like a bruise against May. Nothing you need to worry about, yet. Layla, his voice sharpened, a warning edge creeping in. What do you mean? But I only smiled at the papers before me, a slow smile that he couldn't see, but could almost certainly hear in my voice. Good night, Wyatt. Get some sleep. You'll need it. I hung up before he could respond. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the frantic beat of my heart. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the evidence spread across the table. I remembered the night it had happened. 6 months earlier, when Wyatt was buried in exam stress. He had dumped a pile of forms on my kitchen table, sighing dramatically. You're better with paperwork than I am. Just handle it, Layla. I can't waste time on details. Details. That's what my sacrifices had always been reduced to. Details. I had noticed the error then. His transcript showed May, but the application demanded December. I'd jotted a sticky note reminder, promising myself I'd fix it later. But then the dinner rush had been brutal, and the next morning I had been covering a cashier shift. Somehow, the form had been submitted as is. And now, 4 years later, that tiny oversight pulsed like a live wire in my hands. A doctor without a valid license was nothing. A fraud, a liability. Wyatt had forgotten something crucial in his eagerness to discard me. I was the architect of his paper trail. I rubbed at my eyes, exhaustion tugging at me, but sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing on that stage, dismissing me with clinical precision. Thank you for your service. This is goodbye. But now, my memory replayed it differently. His words became fuel. His arrogance became ammunition. Because he thought the night ended with my humiliation. He had no idea it ended with the beginning of his reckoning. The next morning, gray light seeped into my apartment. I dressed with care, not in my work uniform, not in the navy dress that had witnessed my downfall. Instead, jeans and a simple sweater, neutral, invisible. The kind of outfit that allowed me to move quietly, to be underestimated. At the cafe downtown, I arrived early. The place smelled of burnt espresso and fresh croissants, the chatter of students and office workers humming in the background. Rebecca was already there, tucked into a corner, with a paper cup clasped in both hands. She looked up when I entered, her expression flickering between relief and guilt. Layla, she said, standing quickly, I'm so sorry about last night. I wanted to say something, but it wasn't your place, I finished for her, sliding into the chair across from her. I understand. Family loyalty. Her face twisted. No, cowardice. I should have warned you. I studied her, quiet. She wasn't like the others. Her discomfort was genuine, her hands twisting around the cup, her eyes refusing to meet mine. She carried the same Jacob blood, but not the same armor of arrogance. Warned me about what? I asked. Rebecca swallowed hard. Wyatt's been planning this for months, since the residency acceptance. He told my mom he had to upgrade his image. He said he couldn't afford to be associated with working class. She faltered, shame coloring her cheeks. Trash, I supplied coolly. Her silence was answer enough. I leaned back, letting her words sink in, though they didn't surprise me. They only confirmed what last night had already proved, that Wyatt's betrayal hadn't been a sudden impulse. It had been deliberate, crafted, rehearsed. Rebecca hesitated, then added, He's already seeing someone else. Dr. Ruby Gabriel, a surgeon's daughter, Yale graduate, very appropriate. I sipped the bitter coffee I'd barely tasted, my pulse steady. Of course, an upgrade. Her eyes searched mine nervously. I don't tell you this to hurt you. I just think, you deserve the truth. You deserve better. I studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, I smiled. Not bitter, not broken, but dangerous. You're right, I said softly. I did deserve better, but Wyatt made a mistake. Rebecca frowned. What mistake? I gathered my purse and stood, my chair scraping softly against the tile floor. He forgot who handled all his paperwork. I left her staring after me, confusion clouding her face. But in my chest, clarity burned bright. Because Wyatt had stripped me of everything. Love, dignity, dreams. And now I held the power to strip him of the one thing he valued more than all the rest. His future. The coffee cooled untouched on the table as Rebecca stared at me, her brows drawn together, lips parting as though she wanted to say more but didn't know how. "Layla," she began hesitantly, "when I say Wyatt planned this, I mean, it wasn't just about breaking up with you. He wanted it to be public, dramatic. He told his father it would send a message." My stomach tightened. A message? That he was done with his student years, done with anything that made him look dependent or weak. Her voice cracked on the last word. He said he needed to enter his career without baggage. Baggage. That's what I had been reduced to. Not a partner, not even a mistake, just excess weight to be shed. I clenched my cup, forcing myself not to show how deeply the word cut. And his family, they approved? Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. Not all of them. My mom told him it was cruel, but his parents, they thought it was practical. They've always wanted him to marry into, well, a certain circle. "Ruby Gabriel," I said flatly. Her eyes widened. "You know, you told me enough yesterday," I replied. "Surgeon's daughter, Yale, the right kind of pedigree." I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. He replaced me before he even discarded me. Rebecca's gaze dropped to the table. At my cousin Jake's wedding last month, Wyatt was already introducing himself as single. He made sure people saw him talking to Ruby. Everyone thought, well, everyone assumed you were already out of the picture. A laugh escaped me, sharp and humorless. Funny. At that same time, I was still emptying my savings account to pay for his graduation expenses. Rebecca flinched. "I'm sorry." The words were soft, genuine, and for a moment I felt an odd pang. Pity for her, trapped between loyalty to her blood and shame for what that bloodline had done. I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. "Rebecca, I need you to understand something. Wyatt didn't just break my heart last night. He humiliated me in front of an entire room. He made a spectacle of discarding me like garbage. He thought that was the end of it." Her eyes flickered up, uneasy. "But it's not the end, is it?" I let silence answer her. Silence, and the cold smile tugging at my lips. She set down her cup with trembling fingers. "What are you planning?" I chose my words carefully. "Nothing illegal, nothing violent. But Wyatt made a mistake. He forgot who handled all his applications, all his forms, all his precious documents, and sometimes mistakes in paperwork have consequences." Rebecca paled. "Layla, are you saying—" "I'm saying I know where his skeletons are buried," I cut in. "And for the first time, I'm not going to protect him from himself." Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked torn, like someone caught between the instinct to shield her cousin and the awareness that he deserved what was coming. Finally, she whispered, "He doesn't know what you're capable of." I straightened, gathering my purse. "No, he doesn't, but he will." Outside, the city buzzed with weekday life. Cars honked, vendors shouted, people hurried, with coffee cups and phones pressed to their ears. It all felt distant, muffled, as though I were walking in a different rhythm now. My world had narrowed to a single burning purpose. The folder waited on my desk at home, its pages humming with possibility. Every receipt, every transcript, every error. The graduation date discrepancy wasn't just a clerical slip, it was a loaded gun Wyatt had placed in my hands years ago without even realizing. All it needed was someone willing to pull the trigger. And after last night, I had nothing left to lose.
And
that evening, I spread the documents across my table once more. Highlighters, sticky notes, paper clips. I arranged them with the precision of a surgeon, the detachment of an accountant. Each form was a thread. Together they wove the fragile fabric of Wyatt's identity as Dr. Jacob. And I was about to start tugging. My phone buzzed. Wyatt again. I didn't answer. He texted, "We need to talk. Please, don't do anything rash." The irony nearly made me laugh. He had publicly executed me the night before, but I was the one he feared might be rash. I set the phone aside and stared at the application once more. The discrepancy was so small, most people wouldn't notice. But to the right eyes that lived for catching mistakes, it was enough to unravel everything. I imagined the medical board investigator frowning over the dates, cross-referencing, making notes. I imagined the hospital residency office receiving a call about potential misrepresentation. I imagined Wyatt's confident facade crumbling when he realized his spotless reputation wasn't spotless at all. And the thought filled me not with guilt, but with something dangerously close to satisfaction. Because for once, I wasn't powerless. For once, I held the scalpel. And I intended to cut. The next morning, the manila folder lay open across my kitchen table like a map of destruction. Every line of text, every date, every notarized stamp whispered possibility. My fingers traced the graduation date discrepancy again, May against December. A tiny oversight that now pulsed like a loaded gun. Wyatt had taken my dignity in public. Now I would take his future in private. I picked up the phone and dialed the first number on my list, the State Medical Board's licensing department. My voice slipped into the calm, professional tone I had perfected from years of dealing with irate customers. "Hello," I said smoothly when the operator answered. "This is Layla Tiago, administrative assistant for Dr. Wyatt Jacob. I'm calling regarding a potential error in his licensing application." There was a pause. I could practically hear the woman sit up straighter on the other end. "What kind of error, ma'am?" "Well," I continued, shuffling papers deliberately, "I noticed that his undergraduate transcript indicates a graduation date of May, but the application submitted lists December of the previous year. It may have been a simple oversight, but I wanted to ensure it's corrected before it becomes an issue." My heart hammered in my chest, but my voice remained steady. The woman clicked through her system. "I see. That discrepancy would need to be reviewed. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. We'll need supporting documentation and a formal statement." "Of course," I said warmly. "I have copies of everything right here." "Can you come in this afternoon?" I smiled. "Absolutely. 2:00? 2:00 will be fine." When I hung up, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from exhilaration. It had begun. My next call was to Metropolitan General Hospital. I asked for the residency coordinator, and, after a short hold, a brisk voice answered. "This is Evelyn speaking." "Hello, Evelyn," I said, pitching my tone to sound both helpful and concerned. "I'm calling about one of your incoming residents, Dr. Wyatt Jacob. I believe there may be an administrative error in his licensing paperwork that could affect his eligibility to start the program." Another pause. The tension in her voice sharpened. "What kind of error?" "His medical board is reviewing a discrepancy in his graduation dates. Until it's resolved, I thought it best you were aware." "Oh my," Evelyn breathed. "That's very serious. Is his license in jeopardy?" I hesitated, as if reluctant. "I honestly don't know, but the medical board has opened an investigation." "Thank you for notifying us. Do you have a number where Dr. Jacob can be reached?" I gave her Wyatt's cell. The thought of him answering their call, his confidence crumbling with every word, sent a shiver of satisfaction through me. I wasn't done, not yet. With deliberate calm, I dialed Wyatt himself. He picked up on the first ring, his voice tight. "Layla, I wasn't expecting to hear from you." "Oh, I'm sure you weren't," I said lightly. "But I've been thinking about our conversation. You were right. We really are from different classes." Relief flooded his tone. "I'm glad you understand." "I do. So much so that I thought it best to return something of yours." Silence. "Return what?" "All those documents I filled out for you over the years. Applications, transcripts, licensing forms. I made copies, of course, just to be safe. But since you don't need my help anymore, I figured you should have them back." There was a long pause. I could almost hear his heartbeat over the line. "Layla, what exactly are you saying?" "Oh, nothing important," I said, my voice a purr of feigned innocence. "Just that I noticed a few discrepancies. The kind of mistakes someone of my class might make, you know. Dates that don't quite match up, minor details. I wouldn't worry." His voice dropped, sharp as a blade. "What have you done?" "Me? Nothing. I simply reported a potential error to the appropriate authorities. It seemed like the responsible thing to do." "You reported it to who?" "The medical board and the hospital residency office. They should probably know if there are questions about their incoming resident's license, don't you think?" The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. Then his breathing came fast, ragged. "Layla, listen to me very carefully. Whatever you think you're doing, you need to stop. This could ruin everything, my entire career." "Could it?" I said softly. "That seems like quite an overreaction to a simple clerical error, unless, of course, it isn't an error at all." "You know it was a mistake," he hissed. "You filled out those forms." "According to the information you gave me," I corrected, my voice turning to ice. "If there were mistakes, perhaps you should have been more careful." "Layla, please, I know you're angry, but this isn't the way to handle it. You could destroy everything I've worked for." "Everything we worked for," I snapped. "Or did you forget whose money paid for that education?" "I'll pay you back," he blurted. "Every cent. With interest. Just stop this." I leaned back in my chair, savoring every syllable. "Money can't buy back 4 years of my life, Wyatt. It can't buy back my dignity. It can't buy back the way you humiliated me in front of 50 people. His desperation leaked through the line. What do you want? Tell me what you want, and I'll do it. I smiled, my reflection in the dark window looking sharper, colder than I'd ever seen it. I want you to understand something, Wyatt. Last night you said I wasn't your class anymore. You were wrong. His breathing hitched. I was wrong. I admit it. You are my class. No, I said, my voice steady, absolute. I was never your class. I was always better than you. I just didn't realize it until you showed me exactly what kind of man you really are. Before he could respond, I hung up. The silence in my apartment was electric, thrumming with power. For the first time in 4 years, I wasn't waiting for Wyatt to decide my worth. I had decided it myself. And tomorrow at 2 o'clock, the medical board would begin deciding his. The medical board office was nothing like the banquet hall where Wyatt had cast me aside. No chandeliers, no laughter, no polished silverware, just fluorescent lights that hummed overhead, scuffed floors, and a faint smell of burnt coffee clinging to the air. I sat across from a woman named Mrs. Florence, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She leafed through the documents I had brought, her pen scratching steadily against the pages. So, you filled out all of these applications on Dr. Jacobs' behalf? She asked. Yes, ma'am, I replied smoothly. He was very busy with his studies and asked me to handle the administrative details. And you noticed this discrepancy at the time? I nodded. I made a note about it, intending to correct it, but he was anxious to submit, and I was working 2 jobs at the time. Somehow it slipped through. Her gaze flicked up at me, assessing. And you're only bringing this to our attention now? I let a pause hang, then lowered my voice just slightly, because last night I realized I might not be seeing Dr. Jacob anymore. I thought I should make sure his paperwork was in order before I moved on. I would hate for a mistake I made to harm his career later. Not entirely a lie, not entirely the truth. Mrs. Florence nodded, making another note. We'll need to verify his graduation date with his undergraduate institution and review whether this constitutes misrepresentation. His license will be temporarily suspended pending investigation. Suspended. The word rang like a bell in my chest. I masked my satisfaction with a polite nod. I understand. By the time I left the office, my phone had lit up with 13 missed calls. All Wyatt. I ignored them. But when I returned home, the pounding started. At first it was distant, echoing down the hall, then louder, more insistent. My name shouted through the thin walls. I opened the door slowly. Wyatt stood there, disheveled, his suit from 2 nights ago wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. The man who had looked so untouchable under the chandeliers now looked like he'd been stripped bare. "Layla," he gasped, "please, we need to talk." I stepped aside wordlessly. He brushed past me, pacing my small apartment like a caged animal. His gaze darted to the stacks of papers on my table. For a moment, panic flickered in his eyes. "They suspended my license," he said finally, voice breaking. "The hospital postponed my residency. My entire career is on hold because of a stupid paperwork error. You have to fix this." I leaned against the counter, folding my arms. "Sounds serious. Have you considered asking Ruby Gabriel for help? I hear she's very appropriate for your status." His face went pale. "How do you—" He cut himself off, but it was too late. "I know everything, Wyatt," I said, voice icy. "The public humiliation, the replacement waiting in the wings, the plan you rehearsed with your family." He sank onto my futon, head in his hands. "I made a mistake." "Mistake?" I laughed, sharp and humorless. "A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. You orchestrated my destruction in front of 50 people." He looked up, eyes wet. "I did it to protect you." The audacity of the words stole my breath for a moment. Protect me? Yes. From the pressure, the expectations, the social obligations of being a doctor's wife. I thought, if I made a clean break, you could find someone who fits your world better. My world? My voice cracked with incredulity. You mean poverty, exhaustion, the world you gladly used when it benefited you. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. You were ashamed of me, Wyatt, ashamed of my job, my clothes, my background. You wanted my sacrifice without my presence? You wanted my money without my name attached to it. His jaw tightened, shame flickering across his face. You didn't even tell them the truth, I pressed, my voice shaking now with fury. You didn't say my girlfriend worked 60-hour weeks to fund my dream. You erased me, because the truth would embarrass you. He covered his face with his hands, voice muffled. I know I hurt you. Please, Layla, I'll pay you back. I'll pay for you to go back to school, to build your own life. Just call the board. Tell them it was your mistake. Tell them you'll take responsibility." "Why?" I asked coldly. "Because I love you?" He lifted his head, desperate. "Yes, because you love me." I stared at him, letting the silence expand until it was unbearable. "I did love you. Enough to break myself for you. Enough to empty my savings, to eat ramen, to believe your dream was ours. But love isn't one way, Wyatt. Love isn't using someone until they're dry and then tossing them aside." Tears streaked his face. In all the years I had known him, I had never seen him cry. He had always been composed, controlled, confident. Now his world was crumbling, and he was on my cheap futon begging for mercy. "My future is at stake," he whispered. I leaned forward, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. "So was mine. For 4 years, my future belonged to you. Now it belongs to me again. And as for yours?" I sat back, my voice cool as ice. "That's for the board to decide." He shook his head in disbelief, as though seeing me for the first time. "You're not the same girl I met 4 years ago." "No," I said simply. "She died the night you toasted your freedom." Wyatt stayed another hour, alternating between begging and bargaining. Each word only confirmed how hollow he had always been. When he finally left, slumped and broken, I locked the door behind him and pressed my forehead to the cool wood. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one left behind. I was the one in control, and I wasn't finished. The next evening, Wyatt returned. He didn't knock this time. He pounded. Each thud rattled my thin apartment door like the desperate heartbeat of a condemned man. When I opened it, his appearance startled me. Hair unkempt, shirt untucked, dark circles bruising the skin beneath his eyes. The polished doctor-in-training was gone. In his place stood a hollowed man clinging to the wreckage of his ambition. "Please, Layla," he rasped. "Just hear me out." I folded my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "You've already said enough." But he pushed past me, stumbling into the room as though afraid the floor would vanish beneath him if he stayed outside. "They're digging," he said, his voice frantic. "The medical board. They're verifying everything. Evelyn from the residency program called me 3 times. They're postponing my start date until it's resolved. If I lose this," his breath hitched. "If I lose this, I lose everything." I studied him coldly. "Funny. That's exactly how I felt the night you humiliated me. Like I had lost everything." He turned to me, eyes wild. "You can stop this. Tell them it was your mistake. Tell them you filled out the forms wrong." "Why would I do that?" I asked softly. "Because you love me," he whispered again, his voice cracking. That word, that excuse. I almost laughed. Instead, I walked to the desk drawer and pulled out my phone. "You want to talk about love? Let's revisit what love looked like between us." I scrolled through old messages until I found the thread I had saved years ago. My fingers trembled not with doubt, but with anticipation. "Remember the night before your MCAT?" I asked. Wyatt froze. "What are you talking about?" "You were sick," I continued, my voice steady. "Food poisoning. You could barely get out of bed. You panicked. Do you remember what you asked me to do?" His skin paled. "Layla." I read aloud from the screen. "I'm panicking. What if I don't score high enough? What if all this studying was for nothing?" Then my reply. "Don't worry. I'll help you however I can. We'll figure it out together." I looked up slowly, savoring the way his face drained of color. "Do you remember what you begged me to do for you?" He shook his head, voice strangled. It wasn't like that. You asked me to cheat for you, Wyatt." "No," he said quickly, too quickly. "We never discussed cheating. You refused." "That's right," I agreed. "I refused. But the fact remains, you asked. You wanted me to risk my integrity, so your dream wouldn't collapse before it even began. And now," I tilted the phone so he could see the saved screenshots glowing on the screen. "Now I still have proof." He stumbled back a step, eyes wide with horror. "You wouldn't." I smiled. "Wouldn't what? Tell the truth? Show the board what kind of man they licensed? The kind of man who tried to use his girlfriend to cheat his way into medical school?" His hands shook as he dragged them through his hair. "It was desperation. I didn't mean it. I was scared." "You've been scared your whole life," I said coldly. "That's why you used me. My money, my labor, my love. You drained me because you were terrified of failing. And when you didn't need me anymore, you cut me loose to prove to the world you were above me." "I was wrong," he choked out. "I see that now. I'll do anything to fix it. Anything." I opened another folder on my desk and slid it across the table toward him. Inside were every receipt, every bank statement, every dollar I had poured into his career. At the bottom, a neatly printed total, $53,472. That's what I invested in you, I said quietly. 4 years of my life, my youth, my hope. That's what you cost me. He stared at the paper as though it were a death warrant. I'll pay you back, he whispered. Every cent. I'll find a way. I leaned closer, my voice low and lethal. You can't afford me anymore, Wyatt. Not with your suspended license. Not with your postponed residency. Not with your name already whispering like poison through the halls of the hospital. Tears spilled down his cheeks. He dropped into the chair across from me, broken in a way I had never seen. Please, tell me what I can do. Anything. I studied him for a long moment. Once, that pleading look would have shattered me, made me rush to comfort him, to shoulder his burdens. But that woman was gone. You can leave, I said finally. His head jerked up. What? You can walk out that door and never contact me again. You can let me rebuild my life without your shadow. That's the only thing you can give me now. He sat frozen, as though the words themselves had paralyzed him. Then, slowly, he rose to his feet. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. His voice cracked as he whispered, I did love you, Layla, in my own way. I met his gaze steadily. No, Wyatt, you loved what I could do for you. There's a difference. His shoulders slumped, and then he was gone. I closed the door behind him, the finality echoing through my small apartment. My chest rose and fell, not with grief, but with something sharper, cleaner. For the first time in years, I felt free. Because the final blow had landed, and Wyatt Jacob would never recover. 6 months later, the world was unrecognizable. Or maybe it was just me who had changed. The smell of old paper and coffee filled my small bookstore, chapter and verse. Sunlight spilled through the front windows. Dust motes, swirling like lazy dancers in the air. Shelves leaned under the weight of secondhand novels and forgotten biographies, each spine a reminder that stories survive long after the people who wrote them are gone. It had started with the settlement money Wyatt eventually scraped together, desperate to quiet my threats of legal action. He never paid the full $53,000, but it was enough to cover the down payment on this place, my place. I was unpacking a box of new arrivals when the bell above the door jingled. Rebecca slipped inside, clutching 2 cups of coffee. She still looked uneasy when she saw me, as though half afraid I'd blame her for sharing Jacob blood. Thought you could use this, she said, setting the cup on the counter. And I thought you'd want to know. I wiped dust from my hands. Know what? Her expression softened. Wyatt, his license was officially revoked yesterday. The words landed quietly, without the explosion I might have expected. For months I had imagined this moment, savored the thought of it. But now, instead of fire, there was only a slow exhale, like letting go of a heavy stone I had carried too long. Revoked, I repeated. She nodded. The graduation date was just the beginning. Once the board started digging, they found other discrepancies, patterns of cutting corners, enough to prove intent. I set aside the book in my hands. So it's over. Rebecca's voice was gentle. Yes, he's working now as a medical equipment salesman. Makes decent money, but he's smaller, like something essential got taken out of him. A pang of pity brushed me, but it dissolved as quickly as it came. Maybe it was something that needed to be taken out. She studied me for a long moment, then smiled faintly. I'm proud of you, for this place, for not letting him destroy you. I looked around at the shelves, the cozy reading chair by the window, the small chalkboard where I wrote daily quotes for customers. He didn't destroy me. He cleared away the illusion. Now I see who I was all along. And who is that? Rebecca asked softly. I met her eyes. Someone who doesn't need anyone else to validate her worth. Someone who knows the best revenge isn't tearing someone down. It's rising so far above them that they become irrelevant. Rebecca nodded, but I could see the question in her eyes before she asked it. Will you ever forgive him? I considered it, as I had so many times before. Forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. I already have, I said finally. Not because he deserves it, but because I deserve to be free. That evening, I closed up shop early. My phone buzzed with a text from Brooks, the literature professor who had become both a regular customer and, slowly, something more. Dinner tonight? I found a place I think you'll love. I smiled as I typed back, as long as it's not ramen. His reply came quickly. Nothing but the finest cuisine for the woman who taught me that used books have the best stories. I laughed out loud, tucking the phone into my purse. At home, my new apartment was bigger, brighter. No longer an alley view, but a small park where children played and couples strolled in the fading light. I dressed slowly, choosing earrings I had bought with my own money, a small indulgence that once would have felt impossible. When I caught sight of myself in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her eyes were clear, her smile steady. She looked like someone who had clawed her way out of humiliation and built something stronger from the ruins. I thought of Wyatt then, briefly, of his wild eyes in my apartment, his voice cracking as he begged, and I realized the truth. He no longer mattered. He was a footnote in a story that had already turned its page. The chandeliers, the banquet hall, the cruel toast, all of it had been an expensive education. But unlike his degree, mine was worth every penny. I turned off the lights, locked the door behind me, and stepped into the evening with my head high. Because the best revenge wasn't destroying Wyatt Jacob. It was becoming the woman he never believed I could be. And I had.